Well, welcome back to the Better Divorce Podcast. You might already know who I am, but just in case not, my name is Paulette Rigo, and yes, I am the host of the Better Divorce Podcast and the author of Better Divorce Blueprint and the founder of Better Divorce Academy. Today, we're going to dig into a really common topic I get. What can I avoid doing wrong? And my guest today, Tanya Helfand, is a partner in Schenck Price Smith King, and she's been an attorney for over 25 years, had her own private practice, and we're going to dig deep into this topic. She's also the author of a book called 20 Great Tips for a Successful Divorce. Need I say any more? So grab your pen and paper. Welcome to the show, Tanya. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Me too. So before we just jump right into that, I just want everyone to get to know you a little bit more as a person. Like, why would I invite you to be a guest on my podcast? And what would ever possess you to want to be a certified matrimonial attorney?
I've been practicing for a very long time, as you said. Certified matrimonial attorney, we were discussing it before. In New Jersey, where I am, you have to actually take a test with information, and you have to show the court that you have tried a certain number of cases, have done a certain number of motions, so you have a lot of experience in court or mediation or procedurally before you can get the certification. And then they actually recertify you every 5 years. It's not just forever. So I think about 2% of the lawyers have that credential in my state.
I love that. And I think more states should do that. And again, this is not a blanket statement that they don't. It's just, I learn more every day. If you're not a constant learner, then I invite you this new year to amp that up. It's a really good skill in divorce to keep learning because there's a lot to learn. So you have a practice and you focus on matrimonial law, and you wrote a book called, again, 20 Great Tips for a Successful Divorce. Now, I don't think we're going to have time to go through all 20, but that doesn't mean that everybody can't grab that book. But let's just focus in on some of your, if your go-to, you have to have a list. If you were going on a desert island and you could only bring a few of them with you, what would you bring? So let's start with the ones that really hit home with you.
All right, I'm looking through the book here, and I'm looking at tip number 10, which says, it is certainly important to communicate your thoughts and issues with your lawyer, but it is also important to gather your thoughts and emotions prior to communicating with him or her to be clear about your goals and so as not to waste your funds.
Yeah. So important. I don't think I've heard many attorneys mention that. At least in casual conversations to me. And again, I work with a lot of attorneys, not just here where I reside in Atlanta, but all over the country and beyond. And it's important that you develop a rapport with your attorney, that there's a deep know, like, and trust factor with the attorney that you choose when you're going through litigation and, God forbid, trials, et cetera, et cetera. But yes, one of the things I find that people make a mistake in too, Tanya, is they use their attorney as a therapist. They don't mean to really, but it's sort of like, well, here, while I've got you, blah, and there's the emotional vomiting that goes on. So yeah, now let's walk through that a little bit deeper. So they have made the decision, or their spouse has made the decision, or collectively the couple is making the decision to split ways in divorce. And naturally the first thought is, oh no, do I need an attorney? Do I not need an attorney? Like all the questions, they're bombarded at 2 a.m. when they're Googling or catastrophizing with the procedure. But you're saying in this tip that they should do a lot of pre-work before they get to that point?
For sure. And so, you know what, I'm going to go back to actually the prior tip to make the whole concept here. tip number 9 is your lawyer should give you guidance and information regarding a fair settlement or what your chances are and the cost relative to proceeding in court. So the lawyer's job, I believe a lawyer's job, is to give the client information, educate the client right up front about what the parameters are, how property gets divided, how support is done, custody, all of that. So you understand the rules of the game. Then with that, you can process, understand. Very important. I'm sure you do this at your location as well, or through your process as well, whether it's mediation or litigation. You have to get all your information together and understand the finances. I think that is a critical thing straight up front, is to gather as much information to really put a picture together of your finances. So then once you know your finances or your situation with your children, and you understand some of the rules of the game, you've got to sit down and kind of figure out where you want to go and what you want to do. Now, the emotional component, everybody has the emotional component. I don't care who you are. I advocate, and it's also one of the chapters in here, working with a therapist. I always advocate working with a therapist concurrently with your lawyer, because it isn't really our job. Of course, it is our job to be supportive and helpful and provide the legal stuff, but there often is that time when people go beyond that and they go into the emotional component, and then you're paying me or any other lawyer to do therapy. And that's really not what we're here to do. And we're not trained to do that for you. So it's good to separate the two.
There are many professionals that couples may need or individuals may need, right? Whether they are choosing to be rather amicable and uncontested, or full throttle, let's go for the jugular and trial and the full Monty. And that's a big continuous, but there's typically going to be more than one professional in your life in that process. It just might be as simple as a CPA or some sort of tax professional. It might be a realtor or a mortgage professional. Do I qualify to keep the house? What do we do, and where am I going to live, and how do I gather the necessity of facts to be able to qualify for a new property, et cetera, based on my new set of financials? There typically isn't just one, okay, we're going to get divorced, I get a lawyer, you get a lawyer, and I'll see you in court. There's usually a lot more, I used to call it a Rolodex, right, of professionals or contacts that you may need, and who might they be, who might they not be. It's always good to get an idea of who you might need, and then go, I think I don't need that person, instead of, damn, I wish I'd known about that resource, because now I can't undo and redo what mistakes might have been made. And we, of course, want you to avoid mistakes. So a little bit problem, though, when we go to step number 9 or tip number 9, is that gathering, the facts, right, is that some people don't have them. Either they're not privy to them, or they're really a financial disorganized mess. And that's not a criticism, everyone. Like, we are who we are. But I do remember, way back when my ex-husband and I were discussing divorce, where the mediator that we met with gave us each a form. And I think I got the simple form and he got the not so simple form. And she gave us about 15 minutes to fill out our form. It was like a pre-mediation session. And mine was basically name, address, and, checking, savings, car, what are you driving, what do you do? And of course, he had more questions, and he couldn't answer them because he really just didn't handle the finances now looking back at it. But, if you can't fill out the form because you really either don't have access to it or you're not privy to it, then how does that work?
We help to get the information. So, for example, I have clients who've really never looked at their tax return, or can't seem to access it. If it's a joint tax return,
if you're listening to the audio, I'm raising my hand and she's giggling. So yeah.
If it's a joint tax return, the accountant that prepared the tax return must give it to you. Okay, so if you know the name of the accountant, you can access that directly through the accountant. If you don't even know the name of the accountant, and that happens not infrequently as well, you can go to the IRS and they can provide you with what's called a tax transcript, where they can at least provide a printout what the income was and other information that's important to get things going. So that's one of the basics. Just knowing where the bank accounts are, you can go into the banks. If they're in your name, you can get copies of that. You go to the teller or the desk to ask for a few copies of that. So you can start to gather some of the information. Look to see in your mail the names of the banks where there are possibly accounts or investment accounts or things like that. And you can start to put together a picture of what's going on.
I love the tax transcript. That's a great one. Everyone write that down. I didn't know that there was a term that you requested from the IRS, though. That's key. Yeah, I didn't see the tax returns, and I did not know the name of the CPA or the tax preparer, and they were done by another sort of business entity. So I didn't have any at that access, so it was a little bit tricky. So if you do, listen, be involved in your finances the best you can. Now, you mentioned the taxes, and okay, it's escaped me, but that's okay. It's a lot of overwhelm too if you don't, because now you're suddenly opening up this door into a world of OMG, why am I not aware of these things? Because the attorney is going to say, hey, I need your blah, 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 blah. And you're like, I don't even know what that is. So, I know what it is. The second one was mail. What's that? You know, we used to get mail back when I got divorced. Like we had a little mailbox across the street from our driveway. And every day I was the one that at around 1 o'clock, the little red, white, and blue truck would show up. Remember those days, right? Where the mail would be delivered and you'd get bank statements and you'd get, monthly statements from, well, everyone. Well, those days are kind of gone. Almost everything is online. And if you don't have the login or the password or access to it, and if you're not on the statement, because it's not your name's just on it, it's not easy to find that stuff out, right? It's another roadblock to doing the investigation or the FBI searching, right? Of not picking on the FBI, but you know what I mean? Like you have to be an investigator of your own life. And if you don't have access to that or you don't know it, there are days now when I go to the mailbox like twice a week and there's just circulars from the grocery store, right? They don't even do that anymore, do they? What, we don't really even get mail now. I'm kind of reminiscing. What do we even get mail about? It's usually like roofers or painters or somebody's trying to give you another credit card or something. But that's a big obstacle. So if you're getting divorced, how do we get access to those financial documents if they don't come in the mail and they don't have access to that knowledge?
Well, we have procedures, and every state has procedures of what's called discovery, where you send formal questions to the other side during the process, and for that person to provide, obviously one of the two people has the information, so you send it, the lawyer for the person that doesn't have it sends it to the person that does have it, and it usually gets exchanged actually, and within a period of time, he or she has to produce the data. Now, the reality is, good portion of the time they're missing things and so on and so forth. But I would say it's our job as lawyers to be investigatory and to look at things more carefully. So if you get, for example, if you get a tax return back, a full tax return from the other side, there is a portion of the tax return that you can look at where there will be a list of the bank accounts or investment accounts that the couple has. So you could learn, well, we have a JP Morgan Chase account and we have an Ameriprise account or we have a, Fidelity account. At that point, then if that data is not produced in the discovery, then we can subpoena the records. So there's ways to keep opening up the doors through the legal process to get that information. Now, I'm sure even in mediation, look, the only way I think you can be really successful in mediation is if there is that full disclosure. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So, whether it's through mediation or litigation, you have to get all the information for it to be a fair deal.
Yeah. I mean, discovery is a unique journey of, listen, this is what I think we have. And the other person saying, listen, this is what I think we have. And then do the two, what I think we have, overlap? Is there any overlap, or are they completely different? If one person thinks the money's at Bank of America and the other thinks it's at, SunTrust or, whatever bank it is, then we might go, well, that's an interesting analysis, right? So, or if every single person says, the last four digits are the same and they're all at the account number and they were within $20 of what the balance is, or I'll even give you $1,000 of what you think the balance is, then you're probably in an easier trajectory of being able to mediate than if you really have to go through discovery and then, sending a few letters to the other attorney, like, hey, I think there might be a few things missing, kind of letters. And then all of a sudden we go into, well, I'm going to have to subpoena those documents. And then maybe there's a deposition or two or more, kind of saying, as we dig the hole deeper into that. And some people are super cooperative, right? And others are like, none of your business. So, and what's the gradient of that for you? Investigatory, love that. That is so true, because I see really good attorneys with my clients. Because one of the things I do is help my clients get the right attorney. It's like sort of dating, right? Like, those it's just lunch kind of thing, where you're like, let's have coffee. And, it's not really a romantic thing. Don't get me wrong, everyone. But, there's that feeling of getting to know them and asking questions and do our personalities match? So I love that. Okay. Well, keep going. I want to hear more. What's another one?
Tip number 15. Divorce is sometimes necessary, but the extra battling, if it can be avoided, should be avoided. If it cannot be avoided and you must take a stand for your children, for example, in dealing with issues of severe abuse or neglect, then experts must come in to evaluate the parties to protect the safety and best interests of the children. If your spouse or ex-spouse is simply rude, inconsiderate, immature, please do not articulate this and your frustration in front of the kids. It is very upsetting to them. They will learn who both parents really are from their actions. Kids are not stupid. They get it.
Well, you hit on about 5 points there. So that's awesome, right? So starting with it's always best to try to do it this way, but if you have to do it this way, then, that is always great. I see some people just jump for the long, expensive, drama-filled, difficult way. But Tanya, let's talk about that a little. Why do you think that is? Is it because they want the fight? They want to make it difficult, or they don't know there's an alternative? Or maybe both. I don't know. I'm curious.
I think it's both. I think it depends on the individual. Some people, and I'm sure you've seen it and I've seen it, some people actually affirmatively want to fight in court to harm the other person or to drag it out or to be retaliatory, whatever's in their head.
They want revenge.
Right. So if they have the money and the time to do this, that's what they want to do.
Right.
Okay. And that's what you're dealing with. It is not the only option, and so anyone who thinks that's the only option, that's unfortunate, because it certainly is not. Their services like yours, other, mediators, intelligent resolution, alternative dispute resolution methods, that's what you call them. At the end of the day, right. So if what is that? If you're holding a hot coal, it's the same thing. You want to go through the court system. It's going to cost you a fortune. And I don't really believe the person that wants to do it is getting anything out of it. But again, I can't get my brain around that person. I just have to deal with them.
We could probably sit here for days and drink copious amounts of wine, and it's dry January, so we won't do that. But to try to dig into the DNA or the mindset of why it is some people really find it so necessary. Inflammatory language, uncooperation, refusing to just, fill out the paperwork and let's get this done, or let's sit down at the table and try to come up with a reasonable, equitable resolution, right? I've seen it with some, they just are hell bent on making their life not pleasant.
I want to share a story with you because I think it's important.
Mm.
So, what I'm in the middle right now of a case where, and I don't know about where you are, by us, the courts are really overburdened.
Everywhere.
The judges, right. So the judges have between 500 and 1,000 cases that each one is handling. So their ability to really manage and consider each case in totality, it's just not there. There's just too many cases per individual. So I took over a case at the end where the judge had forced the parties to go to mediation 5 times because he was hoping that they would resolve it in mediation. And unfortunately, the prior lawyer did not comply with and do full discovery during the time period. Okay, because we have deadlines in litigation. And so they kept going around in circles and mediation and circles and mediation. And they did have some level of discovery and exchanged information, but it was not formal. It was not certified to, and there were no subpoenas done to verify the information. The next level of investigation, as we said before, wasn't done. So then the judge scheduled a trial. And believe it or not, we're in a trial without full discovery, which is not supposed to happen because the whole point of discovery is to show everybody's warts, as they say. And when you see, because there's no case that's perfect, when everybody sees really what's going on in the case, the likelihood is it's going to settle, even in adversarial cases. So in this particular case, the judge was so hell-bent on pushing the case forward that a trial is occurring where there's actually discovery going on in the trial. We're getting the answers to questions now that could have been done before to avoid the trial. Now, can I guarantee that the trial would have been avoided? No, because we're dealing with a very difficult person on the other side. But it is not good. And, you get to a point, even if you try and mediate, which I advocate completely, if the person isn't cooperative and isn't giving you everything and you don't feel like you have everything, you really need to take those litigation measures to protect the client and make sure all the information is on the table.
Well, thanks for that. I haven't heard of that before. So that's a new one for me. Now, without you being able to give an answer, but I'm a curiosity king, queen, would call me whatever. What is the likelihood that decision or resolution, we're not exactly sure where this is going, so it's all hypothetical. Once there is a decision, that could be appealed due to the fact that there was a mistake, that discovery had not been completed properly or completed at all.
Right. So that's probably, if a decision doesn't come down in a very fair way, or that, both parties are just exhausted,
Sure,
it probably will be appealed because it was improper. And there was actually an application to try and get the discovery. And the judge, for whatever reason, he chose not to. And it went, so that happens. This is why we have appellate divisions and Supreme Courts and things like that. And right. And, the goal to push it along, to move the cases was greater than the goal to try and let the process occur, even for a short period of time. Certainly don't let it protract, but you have to give the process a chance. And it wasn't. So we're dealing with it. And hopefully at the end of the day, we will get a good result, and hopefully we won't have to appeal it. But that does happen. So that's a lesson Never just like, if you're in mediation a couple of times and it works, fantastic. If it doesn't work, you have to really go back to the other method, I think.
Sure, you don't have much of a choice. I always, if I said to a client yesterday, in fact, he emailed me this morning and tried to call me earlier. I said, I'm on a podcast, can't talk, like life happens, right? But is don't make a decision just to be done with it, right? It isn't, we don't, because it's exhausting and it's expensive and it monopolizes your life on many levels based on how contentious and how complex your situation is. But there are people that just say, oh, Paulette, please, I beg you, just give me the magic potion to make this end now. It is so hard. And having the resilience and strength to hang in there, to let the process unfold as it needs to, in order to have due diligence, right? That may not be the correct word, but you know what I mean. Like it's a marathon and it's not a sprint.
I think that I think that probably from both our perspectives, you see people on either end of the spectrum. You see people that want to fight everything, and you have to kind of pull them back and go, this isn't going to do anything for you. And then on the other hand, correct, you have the person that absolutely doesn't want to address anything and would rather put their head in the sand and accept garbage rather than stand up and do what's right. So it's a matter of being in the middle and helping people, stay in the middle of that situation
Very
for
complex.
their best result. Right. It takes work either way.
It's those people in the middle that typically are reasonable. Right, like, hey, like, this isn't what we wanted. Obviously we get married with the good intention that we marry for the right reasons, et cetera, et cetera. But if for whatever reason the marriage does not work for whatever reason, and we do decide to divorce, you're having an adult conversation about this. Let's see if we can't do this wisely. Those aren't typically the people that bury their head in the sand or dig in their heels. It's that middle ground that usually is more reasonable. Which brings us to the other point that you made about not disparaging the spouse to minor children or major children, if that's the term, right? I never really understand what's the opposite of minor children, right? Obviously, it's not major, but or maybe it is. We don't want to just give your kids a laundry list of all the horrible things that your mom or dad or husband or wife or spouse did, because for so many reasons. I write about this in my book. There are only 6 things the kids need to know, and the details of your divorce are not one of them. But it's tempting, right? There's this feeling of like, if you only knew the hell this blank person was putting me through, then maybe, and it is always best to tiptoe out of the room, take a deep breath, count to 20, never mind 10, find a sacred space that you can vent to, whether that be a journal or a friend or just the screaming in the shower. But the children, it is not optimal. So dig a little bit deeper into that. What have you seen where people, really have dragged them in, and it's been a horrible mess?
Well, I think what I tell my own clients, and I think that's key, is you have to stand in the shoes of the child. Don't just think about your own feelings. And this other person, this other spouse, this other parent is half of your child. As much as you may dislike and hate the other person, and I get it, and you may be right about all kinds of things, basically, when you're bad mouthing the other person to make yourself feel better, you're telling the child that something about them, that's what is really off as well.
Right.
And I don't really think that helps very much. And it certainly hurts the child. And almost inevitably, if you really push it, really, repeatedly say how horrible the other parent is, it boomerangs.
It usually comes back to bite you, right?
100%.
Yeah.
And I think that if you look at the evolution of children, so if you have small children and you start this, or look, children go through different periods of time, and there's, child psychology, and I advocate working with a child psychologist to help your child as much as possible through this process, and to know how to speak to them, when they have questions and so on and so forth, to do the best. Listen, all we could do is the best that we can as parents. And it's, really complicated. But if children, I think, are treated fairly in these situations, they're going to be fine. And they kind of get it when they're grown. Like, you don't really, I've seen, having done this, and again, I've been divorced as well myself. It's tough when they don't really articulate stuff and they haven't developed completely, and they're going through their own changes and their own teenage life and their own complexities with their friends and so on and so forth. But when they're grown up, when they're 20 or 25, that's when they sort of get it. So try and keep the animosity as low as possible. Obviously, safety is a priority. I advocate, if you're dealing with somebody who has a substance abuse issue or an abuse issue or things like that, you definitely want to address it and stand up for your child, because the child may not be able to withstand that bad treatment. But that's different than
just
bad adult behavior.
Your
Right?
dad this, your mom that, your dad this, your mom that. Yes, because if spouse A says negative things about the other spouse to the children, then they feel 50% bad. And if B says bad things about A, then they feel 50% bad. But if both parents say bad things about the other spouse, they feel 100% bad or negative, or forgive the simple word of bad, but what does that even mean? But, self-esteem, and they feel like that. And naturally, children do take after one or both parents, just with physical similarities, right? Eye color, hair color, tone of skin, smile, height, stature, talents, and are they musical, athletic, all those things. We just, even in a perfect marriage, children take after parents in certain ways, right? It's welcome to DNA. It's just being the offspring of two people. But when it comes to conflict and emotions, and it becomes a different layer that's more deep-seated than, oh, you look just like your mother, or you act just like your father, those kind of things. They can't change what they look like, or their talents or skills or personality. It is very detrimental. That's one of the huge mistakes I made, of feeling like my children were old enough to handle some of the angst I was going through. Of course, it's been years and years now. They're very much adults now, from 27 to 32, and two stepchildren, 32 and 35. So, and three grandchildren, believe it or not. I can't believe I have three grandchildren, but isn't that crazy? Because I've been remarried 7.5 years now. So I'm telling this to everybody so you can see there's a process. It isn't like my divorce was yesterday. So, obviously Tanya and I can look back at it as wise women of like, oh, well, back when we got divorced, so, but when you're going through it, right, Tanya, man, it is tough to just feel like, I'm gonna not enter into that conflict of sharing, TMI, right? That expression. I don't think people use TMI much anymore, but I think it should come back. There is in divorce a Jersey barrier that you should not cross, right? It's very important. So let's wrap up with one more. What's your go-to, or what's the one that hits the most? So you see, I don't know, let's say most common, because everybody's different, but what's the one that you really love? What's your pet?
I really love, let's see how I put it down as a tip. I really love giving people, let's see, analyze case. Okay. The power to learn about their finances and make decisions. So that's not a specific tip. The one tip I was just looking at, actually, so you're saying that's the one I love. I like to help the person that comes in, as we were saying before, that feels like they're in a salad spinner. I like to give them directions, tasks, so they can feel like and truly move forward with knowledge and power. I think information and knowledge are power, and I really feel very passionately about that, particularly, and I do represent plenty of men. um, Interestingly, for women, it's often the finances, right, where they need to get their arms around the finances. I would say for many of the male clients, it's they adore their children, but they don't have the confidence to stand up or do the things that they may need to do now as a single parent, and they're too shy to put it forth, even though they're phenomenal parents. So I would say for a lot of the guys that I represent, that's what I do. I give them a little bit of a bolster to do that. And I have passion about that because I represent some amazing fathers, truly valuable, wonderful people for their children, but they don't feel comfortable, or they've never set up the babysitter and the activities and the this and the that, or scheduled things in that way. So I give them some tips and tools for that. So I'd say those are the two things that I'm really passionate about.
And that has a lot to do with dads, with the ages of the children too. Whether the children are 2 or 12, life might be a little bit different with that. So, but yes, giving each of those different examples of the woman to empower her to dig deep and find the necessary financial documents or knowledge that she needs to competently make good decisions. And the father, I mean, obviously this is very stereotypical, everyone, but forgive us for being stereotypical, but that's why there are stereotypes. That dad who basically, yes, is a very involved parent, but hasn't made the dentist appointments, or maybe hasn't, gone to the PTO meeting, shall we say. But that doesn't mean that they can't shift, adjust, and learn. It just takes a lot of mindset and confidence, and having somebody that will gently nudge them forward instead of letting them stay stuck, or like, well, that's just the way it is. I guess I'm not going to know. I guess I can't do that. So we can change. And divorce is another word for change. For me, it was a huge catalyst in changing pretty much every aspect of my life. And it made me a better person. Not that I wanted to go through divorce, but when I look back at it and the person I am now, it can change you for the better. So thank you so much for this. And everybody, get Tanya's book. Again, it's Tanya Helfand. I know if you're putting it in, you want to type it in properly. And the book is 20 great tips for a successful divorce. So Tanya, what is the best way for people to learn more about you and follow you and maybe work with you if they're contemplating divorce in New Jersey?
Well, they can certainly Google me now that you've given the name. Tanya Helfand. I'm here at Schenck Price. And our number here is 973-539-1000 if you want to call the firm. To strategize, I provide consultations, obviously, to give that information and to strategize. If you're ready to do a divorce, we'll move forward. I never push people, but I like to give them information so they can make intelligent choices in their life.
Perfect. And, look no further. If you need help or clarity on this and many other discussions, you can always reach out to me through the podcast. And of course, Paulette at betterdivorceacademy.com. And yes, on the website, Better Divorce Academy. Until next time, thanks, Tanya. See you next time.
Thanks so much.